Okay, Math 2, we are in Unit 4, Week 6, so this should be your remote week. Well, you're always remote week, but for the kids at school, call it a remote week. If you don't get it done in Week 5. So we have quadratics to do, and so we're going to start with just a simple quadratic. So first, what a quadratic is anything that our highest exponent is a square. Okay, so our highest exponent is a square. That makes it a quadratic, which is going to give us the shape of a parabola, which we'll talk about at a later time. But right now, that's why this is called quadratics, is because we're dealing with squares. Okay, so what they want you to do at first, the math people, is they want you to be able to basically know that there's two answers to this. Okay, so we're going to take the square root, and when you take the square root of anything, you actually need to put a plus and minus sign out front. Okay, so when I take this square root, I should have a plus or minus out front, and then actually take the square root. And in this case, we got a perfect square root, so we have square root of 36 is 6. Okay, now what this plus and minus sign does is it actually means we have a positive 6 and a negative 6 for an answer. Okay. Alright, so let's look at one more of these because you guys can do these. Okay. So again, we have a square. We need to find the square root. Make sure there's a plus or minus sign out front. And that leaves us with 7, which actually means positive 7 and negative 7. So that's what you're going to do for your first ones for the kids at home with packets. And you kids on the computer, you guys have your stuff on Edmentum, but it's the same type of stuff. Okay. So what they want us to do in this next section, okay, in the videos, you guys can watch the videos too, is basically figure out what the answer to this equation is. Okay, so what we have is an equation set to 0, and there's something called the zero product property. And what that property says is anytime you have stuff being multiplied, so that's 6 times this stuff times this stuff, okay, and it equals 0, that means these parts of these are going to equal 0. Okay, that's the only way you can get 0 when you multiply is stuff to be 0. Now we know 6 will never be 0, so I can kind of forget about that. Only if there's a variable am I worried. Okay, but these two are going to be equal to 0. So we're going to say k minus 3 equals 0, and 4k plus 5 equals 0. And again, the reason I can do that is because the zero product property says if I'm multiplying to equal 0, that one of these has to be 0. And in this case, we're going to say both are. Okay? And then we're just going to solve for the variable. So add 3 over. That means k is equal to 3. And then we're going to subtract 5. And then divide by 4, and we're doing all this to get k by itself. And then, so k has two answers. These two answers right here. Okay? So let's look at one more, because these are pretty simple. So once again, I have 7 something times something times something equals 0. Okay, 7 will never be 0, so I don't really need to worry about that. Now, if it was 7n, it'd be different, but it's just 7. So this and this has variables. So we're going to say the first one equals 0, the second one equals 0. Solve for n separately, so over here I just add 5 to get n by itself. So 5 is one answer. Add 7 over there, and 7 is the other answer. So there's two answers, 5 and 7. Alright, so there's a couple more problems like that. Okay. Next, we just got through our factoring unit, so you should be able to do this. Alright, so what you need to do is factor first and then do what we were just doing. Okay, so this is a trinomial with a 1 out front. Okay, so what that means is I just put my parentheses, letters out front. Now remember, when this is just a 1, I have to say what multiplies to negative 35, that when I add it will equal 2, positive 2. So when I think of my times tables, I think of 5 and 7. Okay, but I need a negative because it's negative 35. So one of those needs to be negative. So which one being negative will give me positive 2? That would be negative 5. 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay, so that's, a lot of people like to stop right there. They're like, great, I'm done. But when they say solve, they want to know what m is equal to. So then this looks like the last two problems we did. And all we did was we took our variables and set them separately equal to 0. That's almost the same as the last problem. That's what I was looking at. Okay, so then all we do is say add 5, m equals 5, subtract 7 over here, m equals negative 7. So once you get it factored, step 1, then go to solving. Step 2, you want to tell me what the variable actually equals. Okay, let's look at one more of those. So again, this is a trinomial with a 1 out front. So all I have to do is do 2 sets of parentheses with my variable. Still equals 0. Now what multiplies to positive 5 that when I add makes positive 6? So 3 and 2, let's see what that equals. Okay, well 3 and 2 does not actually multiply to make 5. That's what a lot of people are going to do. They're kind of going to get it backwards. They're going to think, oh, multiplies to 6, adds to 5. Okay, because that's usually the first kind of thing that it comes to. But since that's not multiply to 5, then that's not going to work. So what is the only thing that multiplies to 5? That would be 5 and 1. Okay? So that would be positive 5 and positive 1. Set each equal to 0 because the 0 product property tells me that they're going to be 0. And then solve for p separately. So p equals negative 5 and p equals negative 1. Okay, let's look at a few more because I think we have some bottoms up problems. There we go. Okay, now let's look at this one. And that still works just the same. You're just going to factor it, but it's just another way of factoring. Factor by bottoms up. And then do everything else the same. Now I have a small problem right now. This does not currently equal 0, and I have to have it equal 0 to do that 0 product property stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it across the equal sign. So how do I move a positive 3 to the other side? Well, I got to change its sign. So that's why it's a negative 30. Okay? Now, from here is when I'm going to start factoring. So 2 sets of parentheses, still equal to 0. V's out front. then I'm going to say, what does that equal? Negative 210. Okay, and then when I add it up, I want it to be equal to 37. So let me look at some factors real quick. Because 210 is not something that I normally do, like in our times table. So that's why I'm going to use my calculator. I need 37. Okay, so it looks like I have a 5 and a negative 42. That's going to be negative 37, so I need a positive 37. So let's change my sign. All right, so that's going to be positive 37. So minus 5 plus 42. Okay, so remember I'm not done because I have this number out front. I got to take it and divide each by that. So reduce. And then bottoms up. So that's just the factoring part. Okay? But we still need to solve for V. I need to say V equals something. So zero product property says that I can set each of these equal to 0. I get negative 6 there. I did that one first because it's easiest. Okay, then 7V equals 5, and then last V by itself, I divide. So when you get these bottom up ones, you're going to have fractions for answers because you're going to have a number out front. Okay, and then that should get you through this unit. Let me check to see if there's anything else. Nope. All right, let me know if you need help. Email, Google Classroom, Remind, but remember, be specific when you need help. Don't say, I just don't understand it all, okay? All right, thank you guys. Enjoy your break.